Hello, everyone. Today I'm doing another live, and again, I see that the glare from my window needs to be changed. Go ahead and do this. Enjoy this last little moment of time as we get ready to prepare for that little trailer of cold weather we had the other day. Um, and then appreciate this Indian summer of this beautiful weather today, almost 70 degrees. So today, as a continuation of what I'm trying to do here, and I'm new to this. I am just going out on a limb. I'm trying to slowly introduce myself to these new features. So today I'm starting off on YouTube versus starting off on Facebook. So I don't know what this is going to look like, but that's what I'm doing. I did not plan ahead to say this is what time I'm doing this. I will hope that people can go back and watch this at their leisure. So what I've been thinking about is how am I going to put this together? Because basically, where we're at now in this country, in the United States of America, is that the reason why we're here is because of ignorance. And ignorance, as I mentioned before in another video, is the lack of knowledge. And what I've conceptualized over time is that was intentional. So not only were we as and I speak when I say we, I'm speaking of the African American, how we were denied education for a long period of time. White people and others have also been had their information distorted. Okay, and so we got people like Black AF history and stuff like that that's now telling the tale, telling it. So they got history, and then they got our history, right? So they got his story and our story, and so I'm framing it from her story, which is my story, and my perception of the layers of what I know, what I don't know, what I assume, what I theorize, hypothesize, conceptualize, and just deliver. Okay, so yeah, take it with a grain of salt. So I do, excuse me, take this again from what I call the plantation. And for those of you who have not seen previous videos, the plantation is the United States of America. Because at the beginning of the formation of the United States of America, there was so metaphorically, this is a metaphoric. So metaphorically, it is the plantation because you got the big house and then you got the shacks, or you got the slave quarters. And if you kind of look at the United States of America and the way it's kind of set up, it's that way. So we're not only talking about sometimes racism, but we're also talking about classism. Okay, because you got the plantation as a metaphorical place, which is the United States, and then you got the dividing line, which separates the two people. So you got the blacks, and then you got the whites, and you got the big house and the slave quarters. Now, although a lot of white people will say they're not privileged, they're poor, they're working check to check, and all those other kind of things, that may be true. I'm never going to deny that part of classism, right? Because there are white people that are just as without as anybody else. However, privilege, for those of you who challenge it, is not privilege as in rich. It's privilege as in opportunity and not having the type of experiences people of color. Like, for instance, as many of you sit at home, you're not seeing ICE kicking doors and dragging white women and kids out the house, right? And then before that, you did not see um, white children in cages. Okay, you didn't see that. And usually, you're not going to see a white woman being followed around in a store. You're not going to see an unarmed white man being shot down on the news or just in general. You're not going to see that. You're not going to see a black man walking down a street with an AR-15 shoot up everybody and then be handcuffed and taken to jail alive. You're not going to see that. And if anybody has ever seen it, send it to me. I'd be willing to watch it and check my own self about it, because as I know and live and breathe, I have never seen that. So again, just to kind of, provide some context to what I'm saying, is when we talk about the differences between the big house and the slave quarters, I've always envisioned the way the slave quarters are set up, which is pretty much true, is that they're facing the big house, which I feel that was very disrespectful and intentional, because you're looking at a place that you're never going to get, right? You're never going to make it there. And if you do make it in there, it's not through the front door, or it's not as a guest, right? So usually, if you did make it to the big house, it's either because the master was going to make you his little private sex slave, or you were going to be working. Usually, they already had the children picked out to start working in the house, or when they went to the slave quarter, slave blocks, they already knew, based on how the slave was marketed, what role they was going to play once they got to the plantation. Okay. But today, I'm not going to go into that plantation. That was just kind of like a preview of what has been talked about in previous weeks and how we're looking at going forward. Today, I want to talk about colonization. And the reason why I wanted to talk about colonization, because I wanted to go back before I went forward. And so when I was one day just thinking about colonization, and one day I was listening to a anti-race scholar named Tim Wise. If some of you know him, he writes a lot of books. He does a lot of presentations on black and anti-racism, and kind of really speaks to white people about who they are, what they are, and kind of be the voice of an ally, right? So as I was thinking about something he said, when he said one day, he said to an audience of white people, he said, when Europe sent when Europe sent Europeans over here to the United States, they didn't send their best, they didn't send their finest, meaning that early on, when the king and all, like a lot of people say, okay, Europeans came over here for religious persecution, or because of the king, or they wanted their own freedoms and rights, whatever. But ironically, like in most cases, Europe at that time kind of like exiled a lot of people, like you're banned, you're barred, whatever. And so and again, this is theoretical. This may not be actual factual history, so I don't want nobody chiming in, trying to check me or whatever. I'm just saying this is my rendition of what it is. So they kicked everybody out, religious or whatever. And so what they pretty much did was what I'm saying it is garbage utopia. So what the United States became was a garbage utopia. Okay. Meaning that Europe threw away their garbage and they all came over here to the United States of America. Okay. Now, um, the epidemics of arrival of Europeans brought on so many different things that I don't blame you if you don't want to, you don't want to know this history because it's shameful, right? So you had to recreate history. But the honest truth is, with Europeans came disease. Native Americans didn't have that. They lived healthy. They took care of the land. They took care of the animals. They took care of the trees. Matter of fact, pretty much all other cultures, honestly, except for Europeans, were part of the evolution chain. And before everybody became assimilated or acculturated through European ways, which is really what kills everything in this country, before that, even in Africa, we also were a part of the evolutionary chain. So we only killed what we were going to eat, or what we were going to wear, or what we were going to use. We didn't just kill for sport and whatever. We killed because it was part of our role within the evolution of animals, life, water, and all that kind of stuff. However, I don't know how, when, and why Europeans end up with all these diseases and things like that, but I know from doing some research that there was a period of Europe when they were just disgustingly nasty, with regards to throwing fecal matter out the windows, using the bathroom and water, the water, the same water they drink out of. They had just a lot of different things going on that just pretty much kept them sickly, not having long life, longevity. I used to always wonder why Europeans' teeth were so ugly. Like they, not as much now, but back in the day, they used to have some horrible teeth. So I don't know what that was about. And then I also watched videos from the 14th, 15th, 16th century when they used to wear wigs to not for they didn't wear wigs to cover up bald heads. They wore wigs to cover up the lice infestation that they had in their hair. And so that was more or less, then it became a status quo because in order to get a wig, you have to have some money to get the wig. So usually the elite wore wigs. So it did look like a fashion statement for the elite. But also, historically, it also said that Europeans didn't bathe as much. There was even one queen or princess or whoever, they said she only bathed 2 times in her whole life. And it's probably thank God they didn't live that long, because can you imagine? So what I wanted to do was talk about the epidemics that the Europeans brought on. So not only did they just come in and devastate the Native American population, but then they exacerbated the conflict and disruption to every way of life that they have previously known. And this didn't happen like overnight. This happened over a period of time. So again, interestingly, I did not learn some of the more details about Christopher Columbus until I got educated by one of my first Black social studies history teachers, Mrs. Collier. She, even though I wasn't the best student at that time, I do remember more than she would ever know that I remember from the times when I was in her classes, whether it be Bayview High School or summer school at Madison High School, long, long time ago. And so I remember that she mentioned that Christopher Columbus had syphilis, and again, hypothetically, they'll never say this really out loud. I mean, somebody probably has it written somewhere, or maybe have said it, but I haven't really heard it. I'm just making an assumption based on what I've read and putting pieces together that when Christopher Columbus, of course, who was also a pedophile because he had little boys on the ship that he had what they call crewmates or whatever. And he pretty much would go to these islands, and if he didn't kill them, he gave them syphilis, the women syphilis or whatever. And interestingly, kind of rewinding or not rewinding, I'm sorry, forward winding the tape, I would almost imagine because of the Europeans having syphilis is what kind of ignited the ideal to the Tuskegee experiment by giving blacks syphilis to see what it does to them, because historically what white people, Europeans, found out was we were able to sustain their diseases. Now, I don't know if they felt because of our skin color and the fact that we could sustain their diseases, that our skin was like so dirty that we couldn't get sick from them. I don't know what they were thinking. But I know that it speaks a lot about the superiority of biology that we were able to sustain even to this very day. Now we maybe haven't getting hit hard a little bit now because the more we have integrated ourselves into the European um, um, space, is the more that it's become a detriment to us, and that's an opinion with a little bit of facts. And so we were good in a sense until we weren't good no more. And so one of the things that I also want to put out there, if I forget, is just saying again that as a community and as a culture, we need to get back to a place where we have values and respect for ourselves more or less than anybody else. And we kind of deviated from that by integration. That's what I believe. So displacement and violence. All colonial powers were responsible for displacement, violence, and murder of indigenous people. So although I'm not at Africa yet, but when one of the things that I've always imagined, and some of this might be true again, some of this is theoretical, some of this is facts, some of this is metaphorical. You pick, you choose what it is. One of the things that I always think about is the story about the Moors. Now, first they were saying the Moors were African, now they're trying to say they're Arab. So what they seem to do is they always try to take the best things that Africans contributed to history and give it to somebody else. I don't know what that's all about, but I'm going to get there in a minute. So there's the story of the Moors traveling. Now, when they traveled, they didn't take diseases. When they traveled, they didn't go to take. When they went to give, and they went bearing gifts. So in the European mindset, you got these black, rich, mahogany colored people on these horses, camels, or whatever. And with them, they have gold, they have tapestries, they have color, right? They have lavenders and purple and blues and reds and gold, right? They have all of these things that they brought with them and how they travel. And so at some point, Europeans was like, hey, where is that coming from? I need that. I gotta have that. So the queens, the kings, mostly the queens, starting with like Portugal, Spain, and the Dutch, were kind of the first to kind of go out and explore and kind of say, where are these people at? Where I want to know where these people at. So over time, and this didn't just start with like colonialization necessarily, but over time, it was the black people or Africans that went out first, and then they sparked curiosity, and then the others came looking for their knowledge, their gold, their jewels, their treasures, right? Because one of the historical things that said about Christopher Columbus was that he was sent by the Queen of Spain to go like treasure hunt. He got lost, and that's how he ended up in the United States. Okay. However, the United States they're now starting to learn that the United States had been visited by Africans previously. And don't forget too, which I forgot to add, there was once upon a time when the continents were once connected. So there was bridges at some point across the different parts of the continent that connected a lot of things that made it easier for travel. So everybody just necessarily didn't have a boat, but they had ways to travel across the oceans. And so again, the Europeans were introduced early on to the magnificence of African culture. Now I'm going forward. So as they are traveling to find these people, they run across these small pockets of islands. And on these islands are the natives. And those who they didn't wipe out and kill, they raped and then created a whole new um evolution of human beings, which is now like what they call Hispanics. So that could be Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Mexicans, South Americans, Brazilians, who whatever. They what end up happening is they are the ones that spread themselves around to create what a lot of us know of today. Okay. So I'm not going to go into the book on this. I'm just saying. So to get to my point on this with colonialization, when I talk about the Trinity, when I talk about colonization, Christianity, and capitalism. And there's a fourth one, but I'm not going to add that because it's going to mess up my trinity, which is conquest, and that's real. So you can look it up. Um, what I found to be what Europeans have been known for is being deceitful or using deception. And I tried to think about this on a number of occasions. I was trying to figure out to myself, like, how did these people get deceived? How did these white people on a boat come into these islands and were able to just take everybody out? And then a little bit of reading, but mostly my imagination, as I had mentioned before, just thought about they sent the missionaries out first. They sent the Christians. So what they did was they sent the missionaries, and therefore the missionaries went out and they introduced Jesus. Now, that's the question is when they introduced Jesus, was he black, white, or brown? What color was he? I would imagine he was blue-eyed and white with long hair. And that's the reason why when the conquistors or colonizers came thereafter, because they were deceived into the humble, nice, Jesus-like people, it was easy for the second round to come in and conquer or conquest, right? And so, although people will argue, that's not Christianity, yes, it was. Missionaries came out first, told the story about Jesus, and then the others came in after that looking like these same people, like, oh, these people are safe, they're Jesus fearing, they're blah, blah, blah. And then next thing you know, they come in and they take it over. So I would say 80% of the 80% of the world was conquered through the colonization of Christianity, and they capitalized on that. So that's why I call it the Trinity. So when I say the Trinity, when I talk about colonialization, Christianity, and capitalism all being as one, that's why I say that, because when Europeans first left looking for the treasures that the Moors introduced them to, and other Egyptian scholars as such, they went out to find these people and these treasures, and in doing so they got lost, and they found other cultures out there, and they sent the queen said, okay, let's send the missionaries out, so we're gonna do these savages, these wild people, a favor and teach them Christianity. But then now you got to ask yourself, who were the real savages? Who were the real savages? So they took turns going out, deceiving, introducing, and then coming through and conquering, which they capitalized on it, because then they started claiming these islands as their own, or whatever little resources that the island people had, the natives had, they stole it and made it their own, right? So that's where a lot of the earlier appropriation came from. And I also have the same theoretical thing with Egypt, how the Greeks did, right? The Greeks are credited for so many different evolutionary things, but they stole a lot of their ideas, if not most of their ideas, from Egypt, right? And so what happened was, even with that, so Egypt, we know about the pyramids, mummification, we know about dyes and all kind of early astrology, philosophy, agricultural. They was on top of their game long before a lot of other people. And the thing about it that's interesting, and what makes Africa kind of the victim, is because we're very vulnerable as into sharing information and sharing what we have, because when a person has so much of it, you can share. But instead, when you have people who don't have a lot and they get greedy, they want to take it even if it's too much. And so again, like, just thinking about the conquestors, right? Thinking about how they just didn't come to take. They came to just, like, bloodshed everything away. And I think what pisses most Europeans, I said most, what pisses most Europeans off is the fact that we still here. We're thriving. We're still here. And so, one thing I will say is, as we look at what's going on in the United States of America, because the United States of America to me is like another um, Greek and Rome, right? It's like they got a little bit of Greek and they got a little bit of Rome. But here's the end of the story. What happened to Greek and Rome? They're both civilizations that end up collapsing because you can't do bad without bad coming back to you. So when you talk about early Christianity and how the Romans stole it into made it into Catholicism, and when you look at the Greeks who actually wrote the New Testament, meaning that they had to not just interpret it but then misinterpret it because of their language gaps. The Latin versus the Greek language is different. And so when you start looking at religion from that aspect, that's when you can start getting questions answered. If you ever, wanted to know something, you got to start with the thieves. And so even to this day, you talk about democracy, authoritarianism, but the word that I introduced, I think last year in 2024 was kleptocracy, which is like kleptomania. So kleptocracy is when the authorities are stealing stuff, which is what really Trump and them are. Trump and them are not. They're thieves. They're thieves, and they're in the same. And the reason why I'm doing this is because they're in the same colonial mindset, right? And they're using Christianity and they're using capitalism. So putting it together, right? So we go back 3, 4, 500 years, right? Maybe longer, 600 years. When colonization first started traveling the world, trying to find these black people so they can steal their treasures. And then from there, they ended up wiping out probably more than half of the global people that were out here living their best lives, minding their business, to then later on have a whole new historical formation of these same types of people that are doing the exact same thing, using the same triangulation to deceive, manipulate, and conquer people. Same thing. So when from the weeks before, when I talked about the plantation, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Now I'm taking you to another era of history that shows and tells you that the reason why we don't learn what we need to learn is because these people are out here still doing this. And if you don't know, then you're going to get caught off guard. So I'm taking it upon myself to hopefully make this interesting enough for people can say, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I got it now." Because again, they with Egypt, for instance, and it's amazing. It makes me laugh. Sometimes things are so ridiculous, I find it funny. So no, it's not funny, but it's so ridiculous, I find it funny, right? So with Egypt, because I've been doing a lot of work on Egypt in the last 2-3 years now, and we know what Egypt done, right? We know why they blew the noses off. We know why they raided the tombs. We know why they did a lot of stuff that they did because they don't have it on their own. And same thing they did in the United States. Now that we have social media and we have Google and all that kind of stuff, we can learn about things that we never was able to learn about before. So a lot of white people off for being on TikTok and sharing it with their friends and stuff about what we invented. But I always say to myself and others that are around me, how would anybody else invent stuff if they ain't working? The reason why blacks invented pretty much everything because you work smarter, not harder. So how is a white man going to create a thing to help make a slave work easier? No, they're not going to do that. So, but then the ownership, again, the property of the slave being of the white man, that when he did create like an iron, of a furnace, um, cotton mill or whatever, with like everything, street lights, refrigeration, all of that stuff that they created. Of course, if I'm your property, you can put your name on it because you already put your name on me. So of course you're gonna put your name on it. So that's how they end up having everything. So when they talk about reparations, yeah, y'all owe us some money. It's just how is it going to be given to us? Because I don't think we should have it given to us just in my money fashion. Because if y'all was really smart, y'all would do so because they'll just sit in, no disrespect to my people, but we spend. And all they'll do is I mean, David Chappelle did a skit on reparations, and he was talking about Cadillac and Newport cigarettes and all that kind of stuff. Oh, dude, it's so funny. But yeah, so I too agree with if if they were to give us money, half of the economy would boom because Temu and Steen and Amazon, they'll just be off the chain. Walmart, all of them would just be off the chain. And so again, we need to be financially educated first before we ever get any reparations. So again, going back to the Christianity to colonization, I'm reading here from my right. So religion played a dual role in colonization, acting as a primary motivator for both the colonizers and some of the colonized, and serving as a justification for the domination of indigenous peoples. It provided religious colonists with a moral and spiritual compass and justified their actions through divine mission, while also leading to the development of distinct political and legal structures within the colonies. This intertwining of religion and politics shaped the social, legal, and economic systems of the colonies, often leading to religious intolerance and the suppression of native cultures. You know, if Christianity, I was talking to a lady the other day, and very nice lady, and I appreciated her because she was telling me she was a member of Christ King, she was a minister, and I just said, I'm not a Christian anymore. I said, I just want to put this out there. I'm not a Christian anymore. And I know that the place that I was at, most of those individuals are Christian. They even had a choir singing, which hey, don't get me wrong, I love church music. I mean, that I love church music. I can get down with church music, but my spiritual connectedness is not aligned with Christianity in the sense of the resurrection and all that other kind of stuff. And when she mentioned about baptism, I'm like, but Jesus never baptized anybody. I think it was John that baptized everybody. And so I think there's some traditional references relating to the information that's given out about Christianity versus what it is. And a lot of people are not working off of Christianity based on reading their own, Bibles and interpretation. They're doing it based on what they're told. And so one thing I will say is I have read my Bible. That I have done. I have matter of fact, I have done it since I was probably 7 years old. And I know for sure when I was about 11, when I bought my own first Bible, which is around this house somewhere, when I was 11 years old with my own hard-earned money. So I do read. And I still got the Bible app on my phone, so I could go to Scripture. I mean, I'm there. I can do that. Again, it's the way religion is portrayed um in the world and how my spiritual connectedness doesn't align. So I am mostly spiritually connected to my ancestors. And I'm spiritually connected to the larger creator, right? The creator of all things. So I look at animals, I look at things that grow. And I look at how that factors into my humanity and my responsibility to humanity. Now, I wasn't always like this. I didn't start off like this. I grew into this way. So again, I grew up born and raised Christian my whole life. And like as early as Jesus loved me, yes, I know because the Bible told me so, song singing all the way to just I never was in a choir or nothing. I never did that, but I did do announcements. I made it there to the pulpit. But anyway, just my um interpretation of the Bible, just to reiterate that it was translated in Greek, and I have some beef with the Greeks. I just think they are appropriators. I believe that they have swindled and took a lot of information and gave themselves credit for a lot of stuff. And then one day when I get a chance, I'm going to go over like some of their historical philosophers and stuff that were taught by Timbuktu in Africa and in Egypt. A lot of their philosophers studied in Timbuktu or in Egypt, so or other areas of Africa. So again, they were stealing knowledge, and I'll get into that later on. So again, just talking about Christianity colonization. So let me repeat this because I'm not going to be on here that much longer. So again, what I perceive is when the Moors came with their goods, they were fascinated. And in that fascination, they worked to go out on their own to find these treasures. In finding these treasures, now we got to figure out how we're going to get these people from being outnumbered. So, strategically, what better way to deceive a people is through the teachings of Christ, right? And, because the teachings of Christ teach you how to forgive, be loving, invite your neighbor, take in the stranger, let the strangers come into the home, all those kind of stuff. These stories are repeated over and over again, and they still kind of play themselves out over and over again. So the Christian way was to go out, teach these individuals Christianity, so therefore when they came to conquer, it wouldn't take much to do so. They came in like a tsunami. So here come the missionaries teaching these natives about Christ. And then later on, the colonizers came and wiped them all out and took what they wanted, pillaged what they wanted. And this was repeated over and over and over again. And pretty much, if you go into Africa and you look at where Christianity is the most profound, you will find is also the most colonized. And to my Nigerian brothers and sisters who tend to criticize African Americans, you guys were colonized the same way the Native Americans were colonized over here. And you can't criticize what we've been through because we are survivors. And I feel that is very disrespectful for the people who gave their people away for guns and powder and other things to write us off like that. And United States of America, we are the culture that the world looks at, that you take credit for. We are the food. We are the clothes. We are the music. We are the dance. And a lot of the ideas and inventions came from us as well. We just didn't get no credit for it. So I was listening to a presentation, and I like the fact that Kamala Harris is a Vice President. Kamala Harris is a lot different than Hillary Clinton, because Kamala on her book tour, she being straight up. She like, hey, I lost. I ain't got nothing else to lose. And that's again, that's for, as a Black woman, we get to this place. We get it to a point where it's like, I don't have nothing else to lose. Nothing. Because you tried to take everything from me, and everybody stood by and watched. So I like what she said is, we got to fight fire with fire. And even before I heard her say that, I already thought that. You can't, and this goes back to Malcolm X, my favorite, right? Where Malcolm X was like, you cannot be civil with uncivilized people. Now, although white people, Europeans, however you want to frame them, want to portray themselves to be these God-fearing, civilized individuals, no, you're not. Matter of fact, in the last maybe 3 or 4 months, I've been getting so many white male pedophile rings, sex trafficking rings caught up, and we know we're just waiting on a matter of time for the one thing to drop on Trump. But this white man raping stuff been going on longer than now. This, when I talk about colonialization, that started with that. I don't know why they did it, but that's what they did. They raped, they raped, they raped, they took, they just, that's what they do. That's what they do. And they still doing it. And it's like unnecessary. And so with the Christian heart, most people don't fight back because it's not the Christian thing to do. God said turn the other cheek. But he didn't mean your ass cheeks. He didn't mean that. Because now you just keep on getting your ass kicked. Stop it. We need to do something better than this. And one of the things, as I was listening to Don Lemon the other day talk about the Hispanic support of the Republican Party, it's everything about religion. It's not about race. It's about religion. Most Mexicans are Catholic. So they're aligning themselves up with mostly Europeans because Europeans are mostly Catholics too. So that's the mindset. So again, it's the weaponization of using the religion to get over. And then anybody who thinks Trump is a God-fearing man, that man is the devil himself. I'm just waiting for the day his hair to blow over and see the 666 on the back of his neck. He keeps it covered up. I know there's a sick. I know he Damien from Omen. He is the original Damien from Omen. I know he is. Anyway, I also want to say that colonization was similar to what they call invasive species. And I think I brought this up in the last video I did, where invasive species are organisms that can cause environmental, economic, health harm, or displacing native species. So Europeans were invasive species. And not only Europeans were invasive species, but they were also invasive species that had the nerve to forget that it wasn't theirs to begin with. And that's where we're at now. You know, even the South Africans. The South Africans are not white people. The South Africans, if you guys want to go back to somewhere, go back to where you came from, Dutch or where Amsterdam or whatever country that is. Go back there. If you need to be rescued, go back home. That's like a runaway going to a trap house and saying how miserable they are. Go home. You don't have to stay at the trap house. Matter of fact, I have a story. There was a young white girl. I don't want to say her name because she might be out here in the world, but it's been like 20 years ago, so she got to be in her 40s by now. And very nice looking suburban white girl. And so in the time that I was working at the Red Cross Women's Overflow Shelter, which was behind the rescue mission at the time, she comes in there every night. And what I noticed within like 3 or 4 months, she had new boyfriends. And I'm not talking about boys. I'm talking about men. Raggedy, homeless men. Okay? No disrespect to the homeless, but she was this nice, young, white, suburban girl. She started off, I guess, with somebody, and I believe she was going with a black boy as to why her parents kicked her out the house. But then over time, this guy, I guess he must have went home, and she stayed out there in them streets. And one night, I don't know what was going on with me because that's how I am. Sometimes I'm very impulsive like this. You know, that's why I can't never schedule a live because I never know if I schedule it, I may not, stay on task. But anyway, one particular evening, I just pulled her to the side and I said, go home. Go home. I do not want to see you back here anymore because I'm watching you and I see that you're being ran through. These black men are running through you, and you ain't gonna be about nothing by the time they finish. Go home while the going is good. Go. And I never seen her after that. I never seen her after that. So I'm glad she didn't come back because I hated to see what they was doing to her. I hated seeing that. And I hate that maybe her parents put her in that situation as well to make her feel like she couldn't come back home. But I didn't mean to like necessarily kick her out the shelter. I was just trying to give her her freedom because it was only a matter of time she was going to get hooked on some drugs or something. She wasn't going to be able to come back from that. But anyway, going back into the invasive species. So again, when we talk about being civilized and who is actually civilized versus who is not, okay? Just again, paying attention to what I'm saying. A lot of, European men, especially European men, have it good because, like Trump, while they're pointing the finger at everybody else, look what they're doing. They're rapists, they're thieves, they're drug dealers, they're drug addicts. That means you ain't paying attention to the ones that are really doing it, right? So while they fixed it, while white men a long time ago fixed it to where black men gonna rape their women, y'all was raping us. Y'all was raping black women every day, all day, raping us while accusing black men of wanting to rape your women. And doing the same thing to Hispanics, doing the same thing to Asians. The history is mainly white men always accusing other racial men groups of wanting their women. When in reality, y'all two of a feather. These white women want everybody else. They want black men more than they want white men. Most of them really want black men. Most of them want other men. They want Mexicans and Asian. And actually, it's interesting because although United States of America is a very racist country, when you look at the European white people here, they're the main group mixed up with everybody. They're the mixtures of everything because they've baited everybody else against each other. They made everybody else hate each other and make them believe that they got to stay with their own while they're jumping around with everybody else. And that's just being honest, okay? That's just being real. And so they are the invasive species. So going back a little bit to how did religion impact colonization? Religion empowered the British to go to unknown lands, enslave and colonize Africans, destroy indigenous nations, and develop a new country. This came off of the internet. They were able to justify their harm to the indigenous people because they saw them as savages. Who were the savages? Who were the savages? Colonists were able to enslave Africans because we were heathens. Isn't that something? So their justification for destroying the indigenous nations and colonizing Africa was because they thought little of us. They thought very little of us. And so being that we ain't nothing and they're everything, they made us into victims. And even to this very day, they're still creating victims. To this day, kicking in people's doors, snatching out teachers, and y'all are the criminals. Talking about they're going out here to get the criminals. No, you guys are the criminals. You are behind the pedophiles, you're behind the mass shootings, you're behind everything that has been destructive in the United States of America. You know why? Because nobody else out here can do anything because you always got your eyes on us. We can't do anything. Now, there's some people that get away with some things, or, the prisons need to be full with somebody. But in realist terms, white men are behind most of the criminal enterprises. They're behind it. We didn't bring crack to the hood. The Reagan administration did. We didn't bring fentanyl into the hood. The Bush and Clinton administration did. It was always about self-destructive measures. But one thing I will say is this. What are y'all gonna do with yourselves when everybody gone? Because y'all ain't never worked for yourselves, barely. Now, one thing I will give European men credit for, y'all can build a house, a cabin, y'all can build a bunker. Y'all good at building stuff. Y'all are really good at building stuff. I would give that 100% to you. But y'all also good at destroying stuff too. Really, really, really. So I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm just saying this because this is what it is. So what role did Christianity play in colonization? Christianity was one justification that European powers used to colonize and exploit Africa. I think I shared with you maybe last year when I was doing these videos that when I first got to Ghana, Accra, Ghana, in 2019, one of the first things I seen was a large statue, a large white statue with Jesus wearing like a blue cloak or whatever and blonde hair and blue eyes. Big statue right there. It's almost like I explained to people, it's almost like that scene off the Planet of the Apes at the end when he said he was in the United States all this time. I've been home all this time. When he seen the top of the Statue of Liberty, that's the very first 1968 version with Charles Heston, Planet of the Apes. And when he got to that part where he said he seen the Statue of Liberty, he was like, "Oh my God, I've been home all the time." When I seen that Jesus, that's what I thought. That's what I felt like. So anyway, through the dissemination of Christian doctrine, European nations such as Great Britain, France, and the Netherlands sought to educate and reform African culture. They didn't need reforming. They didn't need it. And I know some people said that Christianity started in Africa. I got something for y'all in the future. Not right now, but in the future. I'm still doing my homework on that. So the 3 C's: colonization, civilization, Christianity, and commerce. So civilization would be colonization, the belief that colonizers would bring a superior European ways of life, education, and social reforms to civilize indigenous populations. So they thought they was doing us a favor. That's funny. Christianity, the aim to spread Christianity and convert local populations, often carried out by missionaries as part of the colonial effort. These are not my words. These are words that I got from somewhere else. But I brought them to the screen because this was already in my spirit. I've already had this aligned in my spirit. I've already spoke on this. And then I said, because I know people out here be wilding out about what's true, what's not. I wanted to add some facts to this, right? And then commerce is capitalism. So the economic motive to gain new markets, acquire resources, and boost trade for the benefit of the colonializing power or colonizing power. So my 3 C's, way before I ever read this, was colonization, Christianity, and capitalism. And so happened I ran into these 3 C's: colonialism, civilization, and Christianity. I ran into the same thing, or commerce, ran into the same thing. So conquest would be the 4th one, but conquest is the C of destruction, right? Not the SEAC of destruction, but the letter C of destruction, through sometimes considered as the 4th C. It refers to the military force and political control used to take over land and establish dominance. So y'all just came in and just stole people's stuff. Y'all just came in and said, "I like this land. It's mine. Go away." Writing bogus treaties that most of them couldn't even really read English and interpret English, especially the King's English. I know that was hard. Try reading the King James Version of the Bible. That's really rough. Also in colonization, y'all just claiming stuff. So one thing, y'all, if y'all don't know about President Abram Torre, y'all need to look him up because right now he is the future of Africa. And I say Africa not just as a continent, but as the United States of Africa, because that's what they're doing now. They're in the process of cleaning Africa out and up. Okay. So President Abram Torre ain't no joke. I look at it like this as I get ready to wrap up. United States of America is going to be like the fall of Rome, where Trump is going to be known in history as the person who um, brought down white supremacy. He showed his ugly self, but he also is going to be the one responsible for the fall of Rome, which is the United States. And then while United States, which was always looked at as a superpower, is being destroyed, Abram and Torre and those who are supporting the mission is decolonizing Africa as we speak. And they're on the rise as we speak. So pay attention to that. So with every time I end, I have a quote that I have to find because I don't want to leave without a quote. So I have this quote that was actually for another time, but because I couldn't find another quote, it is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. And that's by Audre Lorde. Okay. So again, we may be different, and difference is good. But like I was saying about lately about a lot of like I was having a conversation with a friend or a family member, and we were talking about how Europeans are now trying to appropriate our recipes and our food. And which is fine. I mean, we're in the United States. I think that it's nice that we can all share our dinners and our food and our culture. But I think Europeans need to understand, what do y'all bring to this table? What original thing do y'all bring to this table besides a casserole, whether it be green bean, tuna, macaroni, whatever? What else do you bring to the culture, and stop raping everybody of their culture and just in general? And also, as a people, we do need to start looking at white men and white women like we look at everybody else, because a lot of the big crimes that are being committed in this country are being done by them. And I'm not saying that to be an angry black woman. I'm saying it because it's true. It's true. Statistically, it's true. Pedophilia and mass shootings are predominantly by white men. We know that from the Catholic Church. We know that just from the child pornography industry and all of that. And now our president of the United States, I mean, y'all president of the United States, once this get caught up and everybody stop defending him and protecting him, because he's protecting a lot of these white men. I'm sure there's a whole gamut of them that's going to be caught up on this. So that's going to probably be the fall of white supremacy when this um, comes to the fruition. So I'm almost at my 60 minutes. I don't never plan on going past that. Again, just to kind of reiterate, this is the conversation about the plantation. Today, I spoke of colonization, Christianity, and capitalism, the Trinity. And so these will be talked about in future videos, because I will be continue to bring stuff back and forth, and just kind of reintroduce these things, these concepts, because repetition brings memory. And so for that to be ended, I want to thank you all for watching this podcast or video or live stream, whatever you want to call it. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.